Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we'll be discussing how the IRA home energy rebates and virtual power plants can work together to achieve maximum savings and benefits for energy customers and the grid. So today, we'll be hearing from myself representing RMI, as well from David Hunter representing the Flex Coalition to give an overview and a welcome. We'll hear from a set of 4 panelists today that we're very excited to have here, and the panelists will give a set of opening remarks, and then we'll have a moderated discussion for about half of the webinar, so feel free to send in your questions, and then we'll have some closing remarks. Some initial housekeeping at the start. We will be recording today's session and posting it to the same page on RMI's website where you registered for this event, and the slides will be up there as well. And the invitation is to use the Q&A function in Zoom. We will see that throughout the session and pull it in for the moderated discussion, so please send in your Zinger questions. So just to get us started and oriented, I'd like to give an overview of RMI and the virtual power plant partnership. But first, we're saying virtual power plants, we're talking about home energy rebates, and I'd like to do a quick check-in poll to understand where each of you are at in your understanding of these concepts. So the first question that we're launching right now is how much do VPPs show up in your day-to-day work? Maybe you think about them daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, or you're new. And you'll have the ability to answer the second question as well, which is how familiar are you with the IRA home energy rebates? Maybe you're very familiar, somewhat, or new. I'll give folks about 30 more seconds to answer, and then we'll share the results so everyone can see. So far, I'm seeing about a third are new to virtual power plants, a third think about them daily, and about 20% think weekly. And then for the home energy rebates, I'm saying about half are somewhat familiar, which is very exciting. So we'll have a pretty broad understanding of some of these concepts today, and then we'll go through. I'll give it 10 more seconds, and then we'll share the results so everyone can see. All right. So we're going to close the poll and share some of the results. You should be able to see on your screens now, we have about, 35% of folks are new to VPPs, with the rest of the spread around daily, weekly, or monthly. And then a 50% right on the nose, somewhat familiar with these home energy rebates. So thank you for providing that input, really helpful for us as we kind of frame our discussion today. So just to level set as a group, what is a virtual power plant? How do we define it? So a virtual power plant is an aggregation of grid-integrated distributed energy resources that can balance electrical loads and provide utility scale and utility grade services. So when you say distributed energy resources, you can think of electric vehicles, you can think of battery storage, distributed solar, plug loads, smart thermostats, heat pumps, and the like. And you can see some more in this graphic here. I like to think of virtual power plants as an integrated repackaging of familiar terms that have been around for decades in the energy space. It involves demand response. It involves energy efficiency, which we'll be talking about a lot today. It involves demand-side management technologies, demand flexibility, and those DERs that I mentioned earlier. So today we're going to really focus on how the energy efficiency side of the equation plays into being a fundamental base load to virtual power plants. Brief overview of who the Virtual Power Plant Partnership is. We are an initiative housed within RMI. We're a coalition of approximately 25 VPP technology and service providers spanning the automotive, building, energy service, and software sectors. And our mission is to catalyze industry and change the necessary policies, regulations, and market rules for VPPs to scale in ways that benefit communities and society. So this is what we think about every day. If I filled out that poll, I would definitely click daily. We engage different types of stakeholders around the US. So we engage regulators, utilities, policymakers, and market operators to discuss how VPPs can be leveraged to achieve some key outcomes like affordability, reliability, and decarbonization. And today, I really look forward to hearing in this webinar how the home energy rebates, inclusive of the home efficiency rebates and the electrification and appliance rebates, how they can how they work, how they can help support VPPs, and also noting that these rebates are complementary to programs like Solar for All and tax credits, so we can try to drive adoption of all of the technologies that can be part of VPPs. So with that, David, I will hand it to you.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much, Avery. My name is David Hunter. I'm the director of the Flex Coalition, and I'm delighted to be here with Avery and the RMI VP3 team as the co-hosts of this webinar. I'd like to say a couple of quick words about the Flex Coalition. The Flex Coalition is a coalition of the nation's leading commercial and residential demand flexibility providers. So these are companies that are leaders in providing demand flexibility solutions in energy efficiency, in demand response, in behind-the-meter solar and storage. And they all share a common sense of the importance of demand flexibility. The Flex Coalition believes that demand flexibility is critical to enabling the decarbonization transition, and believe that this demand flexibility is critical for ways such as increasing reliance on renewable energy, maintaining maintaining grid reliability and resilience, and supporting energy affordability and equity. And so the companies that we saw on the previous slide, they have all adhered to a set of principles, a common set of principles, and you can find these principles on the Flex Coalition webpage, flexcoalition.org. But those are principles such as the importance of enabling market-based solutions and pairing of demand response and energy efficiency. And on the next slide, the Flex Coalition mission is to support performance-based demand flexibility as a means to enable VPPs. And we're dedicated to educating policymakers and stakeholders on the many benefits of VPPs for consumers, for the grid, and for the environment. And we do that through all sorts of activities, through webinars, through workshops, letters to states and agencies, meetings with policymakers, responses to RFIs. We've created a homes sample template on our website, and many more items, many of which you can find on our website. So without further ado, I'm going to turn to our panel. I'm also delighted to be the moderator today of your panel. And we have really a fantastic group of panelists today. So we've got a leading practitioner, really the world's leading expert in the IRA homes provision, and 2 state commissioners. So we're gonna go through. We're gonna have some opening remarks from each speaker, and then a moderated discussion. And of course, I'll be looking for your questions and comments in the Q&A as well. So I'm going to turn to Carmen Bess first. Carmen is the Chief Policy Officer at Recurve. She has a long history of working in energy efficiency and demand response, previously having been at the California Public Utilities Commission. And I should note that she's also on the Flex Coalition Steering Committee and has been very helpful in guiding the Flex Coalition and helping us really ensure that IRA home energy rebates are implemented in such a way as to provide all the tools necessary for VPPs. So Carmen, turning to you, you, as a leading practitioner, I would like to hear your vision in how we can really transform the world from one where demand is largely static to one where demand responds flexibly to supply in order to enable all those benefits we've heard about. And what policies do we need in order to be able to do that?
Great, thanks.
So, Carmen, over to you.
Thanks, David. Before I get started on that answer, I wanted to chime in a little bit about what Recurve is and how we fit into this solution. We're a software company that is analyzing energy consumption to do 3 main things. We're looking at where the best opportunities are for investing in demand flexibility to synergize the grid value and the customer value. We're tracking and monitoring the impacts of those interventions and leveraging our open source advanced measurement verification platform to do so. And then we can package that together to provide settlement and reporting capabilities so that folks can have confidence in the transactions and the stream of benefits that open the doors for aggregators and other service providers to kind of tap into these opportunities that are out in the market, including IRA and other VPPs, et cetera. Recurve is a member of both the both Flex Coalition and the VP3 initiative. So over the past 2 years, I guess it's been, or year and a half, that's meant that I've been straddling both of these worlds and kind of looking at the policies and solutions that are going to be most important for both. By way of my opening comments, and we're going to get into a lot more of the details on specific policies and solutions, I wanted to highlight kind of 3 things that have stood out to me on the policy landscape. First and foremost is all of these solutions are trying to have a multivariate optimization function. In effect, we're trying to optimize grid value. We're trying to optimize customer affordability, so the customer bill reductions, in addition to reaching carbon or sustainability goals at the same time. And I think as we've looked at the deployment of singular initiatives like the IRA Homes Act or combined initiatives like the VP3 initiative, what we're finding is that these things are all going to be more effective when they're done together. And I take kind of this better together sort of approach into all of the policy questions that are out there. If everything's fragmented, we're going to have a harder time getting traction and also have a harder time engaging the billions of dollars in effect that we need to affect these changes. The second thing, of course, no one will be surprised to hear this from me, is that measurement is still a key to establishing feedback loops, both on the policies and on the implementation effectiveness, as well as just having the alignment of incentives and accountability within the system. We're better able to do it today than we ever have been, and we're continuing to get better and better at providing access to data, to enabling digitization that's going to allow for this combined implementation of these types of solutions, and be able to see both the technology impacts on a dynamic basis and also the business solutions that are going to get us to being able to see and transact buildings as assets within our grid system. IRA measured pathway in particular is a great opportunity to test and get comfortable with data-enabled program models and be able to drive those solutions home and get more familiar with them. The third thing that I wanted to highlight on the policy context is not really policy at all, but it is execution is everything. As I've been engaging with state energy offices and the like, there are lots of smart people out there with lots of great ideas, the big ideas of the legislation itself, but then also all the details that go along with implementing and executing it effectively and efficiently. And as you watch utility staff, state energy offices, consultants, implementers, and vendors trying to figure it out, they're all doing it with first and foremost, good faith. And secondly, they're coming up with unique solutions that are really appropriate to their local jurisdictions. And in my view, that's the policy component or anchor that's going to have the staying power to make sure that these investments in the Homes Act in particular, and any new investments from VPP buzz, as it were, are going to have more of a sustained impact and an ability to be seen over the long term as part of our operations going forward. So I'll leave it there for my opening comments and kind of touching on your question, David, and hand it back to you to take it to the next.
Well, thank you so much, Carmen. That was fantastic. And I look forward to delving into more of those points with you during the discussion. I'd next like to turn to Cara Rinaldi. Cara is the president and CEO of the Andal Policy Group. She's also really the original mastermind behind the Hope for Homes Act, out of which grew the IRA home energy rebate provisions. I should say she's also the founder of the Flux Coalition and its parent organization, Smart on Smart. So she has quite the list of accomplishments behind her belt. So Cara, question for you, as really the world's leading expert on the IRA home energy rebate provisions, I can think of no one better to give an overview of those provisions and how they can help enable VPPs. So over to you.
Thank you, David. And following Carmen, a quick note on the Andal Policy Group. The Andal Policy Group is an energy and environmental strategy firm based in Washington, D.C. And we work with clients to address any clients that are working on addressing the climate crisis. We work with them for policy solutions to enable that. That has led to a lot of work on the rebate programs. So with that, okay, here we go. So the Inflation Reduction Act was signed into law almost 2 years ago now. It included what was once the Hope for Homes Act. The Homes Act has been around since around 2012 and actually grew out of the Home Star discussions from a few years before that. Hope became the contractor training grants, or now TREC, which are grants to support contractors and being trained to do these rebate programs. And then what was Homes was split into Homes and HERE. So Homes is a measured and modeled performance-based energy savings rebate program, whereas HERE is an electrification rebate program. I'm going to be talking about Homes. HERE is prescriptive, where you get a rebate for a measure, whereas Homes is performance-based, so it's a deeper or bigger rebate for a deeper amount of energy savings. So Homes is the homeowners manage energy savings. That's why it's Homes. It's also referred to as a home efficiency rebates in the guidance. It's $4.3 billion for Homes, and it is performance-based, as I noted, and that money is split by formula, by the SEP formula, to the state energy offices. The state energy offices direct these funds. It can be provided for single and multifamily homes, and it does have caps associated with it, particularly for market rate customers. For low income customers, DOE can be states can ask DOE for larger rebates. They can be used in modeled or a measured approach. I'm going to be talking about the measured approach today because that's why we're getting these virtual power plants. But so you know, the Homes rebate program can be implemented by modeling, essentially establishing the baseline using measured data. You still need access to the data to establish a baseline, modeling forward the measures, and then providing the rebate based on those predictions in two different buckets, either 20% equals $2,000 or 35% equals $4,000 of a rebate. Again, double or increase for low-income families, or the measured approach, which is payment based on actual measured savings, which I'm going to talk about now. So the measured approach can also include time, location, and greenhouse gases. And in fact, states are required by the law to provide a plan to value savings based on time, location, and greenhouse gas emissions as part of Homes. So the measured approach can allow, the way it's designed is that homeowners and contractors receive the upfront rebate, but the risk is borne by the aggregator for the actual energy savings. And in the measured approach, it is done at a portfolio level, so that as long as the portfolio meets at least 15% energy savings based on the baseline, then the aggregator receives the per kilowatt hour, which I will explain in a moment. It allows states to customize their programs to align with their state energy policy. So to what Carmen mentioned about how states really need to be able to provide the pathway that's based on their jurisdiction, that is where the measured approach really allows for state policymakers to adjust for and value energy savings in the way that it would best fit their state. It can help improve grid reliability and flexibility this way, and give states tools to align the rebate with their emissions reduction goals. So specifically, sometimes I hear that the measured approach is complicated. I say the measured approach is math. And so it's really a calculation based on the average energy savings of a state. So this example shows a Texas single family home. It's the total energy use, so it's kilowatt hour equivalent. The Homes program, not the HERE program, but the Homes program is fuel agnostic. States can incentivize based entirely on electrification, but the law is agnostic on energy savings, and also on and it's based on the total energy use of the home that you're saving. So if you are transferring from, gas to electric, you can count those gas savings. So the measured approach is based on 20%. Of the energy savings of the average home equals $2,000. That's your kilowatt hour equivalent. So in this case, 46 cents a kilowatt hour. That's the energy savings and that's the amount of rebate that would be provided for that to the aggregator based on the measures that are done. And as long as the portfolio meets at least 15% energy savings, the aggregator would receive the rebate based on the savings that are actually achieved. Turning the measured approach into virtual power plants is really focusing those savings on certain times of the day. So you could adjust the actual payment rate rather than that 46 cents. You could adjust it so that you have much deeper rebate based on where it's really needed in the grid or based on where the emissions are. So really focusing on the actual hours. All kilowatt hours are not created equal. And so the measured approach allows policymakers to value the energy savings based on those hours. So by increasing some values and decreasing others, you can still have the average rate equal 20% savings equals the 2,000. That's what's in the law. And I'll show that right here. This is how that would work. Now, if you're doing for lower income families or you're focused on low income families, as many states are going to be doing, then they could ask DOE to make it a much bigger number. So that 20% could equal $4,000 or $8,000 or $10,000. So you can make those adjustments for based on that, or you could just use adders as well for greenhouse gases or time and location. But this shows that you can do this and you can adjust based on time and location solely for based on the time, location, and greenhouse gases in the measured approach. So this is my last slide. And I know this was a dense topic, but really what this comes down to and what based on, as Avery was explaining what virtual power plants are, that is exactly what the homes rebate program can be used for. And the measured savings allows the flexibility to manage grid needs using the rebate program and moving and aggregating this energy consumption so that it can support a lot of the same energy services as power plants, from capacity and energy. So, and it can also incentivize time, location savings and meeting addressing curbing peak load so that demand needs to meet peak, and we can keep that from making needing more power plants or keeping power plants online. And with that, I'll turn it back to David.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Kara. That was a great overview. Let's see. For those of you who are math experts, we will be having a math quiz at the end. And for those of you who are not, it will suffice to know that the IRA Homes Measured program is a great way of enabling virtual power plants. So Kara, thank you for laying that all out. I am next delighted to turn to Commissioner Stacey Paradis. Commissioner Paradis is a commissioner on the Illinois Commerce Commission, which regulates not only electricity, but also gas, water, sewer, telecommunications, and transportation. So honestly, I don't know how she has the time to turn to matters such as this when she has so many different things on her plate, but we're very grateful to her for doing so. I note that she was also previously the executive director of the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance for quite a number of years. So she certainly is no stranger to energy efficiency. So Commissioner Paradis, after hearing hearing Kara's explanation of the IRA and the measured approach and how that ties into VPPs, I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about sort of the landscape for virtual power plants in the state of Illinois and how you're seeing those be a part of the Illinois energy solution, as well as how the any plans the state may have for utilizing IRA homes program as part of that.
Well, thank you, David. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I do want to share before this starts my fun fact about the Illinois Commerce Commission, We regulate all the things you talked about, plus we regulate tow trucks and repo men. So those are my fun little tidbits for the day. I've been in this position for a little over a year. So Commissioner McAllister has far deeper experience in this space. But one of the things that I want to make sure, and I bring this up almost every time that I talk, is I've gone from a nonprofit world where I had a lot of opportunity to interact with folks all the time, and people were always coming in to want to meet with us. And then you go to the commission, and not as many people come and talk to you about ideas or what's impacting their communities and key stakeholders and things like that. So one thing I just want to start out with the beginning, I would really encourage people to still reach out to the commissioners, reach out to our advisors for those of us that have them, and then staff. There's a good opportunity to really educate all of these folks, because if not, we're living just within the things that are filed within our dockets. And it's really important to make sure that we have access to folks. So I wanted to start with that. I also wanted to share, obviously, as I said, I've only been in this position for about a year. I'm going to talk very high level today about things that are kind of my reaction based on, a lot of it is based on my experience in energy efficiency prior to coming to the commission. But I think you've gotten a great overview. I think Avery started with really what VPPs are, how they're going to work. So it's a twofold issue, right? VPPs in theory are working with something that already exists, as we've talked about distributed energy resources, but it's how it's being packaged that's so new that I think is going to take a lot of education to commissions on how is this going to work. And I think Carmen was exactly right when she talked about measurement. Obviously, everything comes down to what is that actual impact that's happening. That's something that we as commissioners are responsible for when we talk about what is the overall investment. Obviously, the incentives, those are going to vary state by state, utility by utility. And that's something that understanding, even though we want this is federal funding, it is coming down nationally, it's going to be different state by state. So we have to be understanding of that. And then implementation. I've known Kara for a long time. I give Kara a hard time that she's the dog that caught the truck, and she's trying to figure out how to implement all of this stuff, and then working with 50 states to do that. So I credit her with all of this, the great ideas that are out there. So what we look at it, these are distributed energy resources. These are things that have been around for a long time, but aggregating them and using them as a system-wide benefit, that is really new. And then what kind of benefit does that have? Obviously, when you're able to reduce peak, as Kara talked about, that's very important. When you're able to reduce the need for new generation, that's even more beneficial. And anytime we can reduce new generation or cut back on the generation that's out there, that really helps from an equitable situation and related to emissions reductions and things like that. So there is a great opportunity in making sure that we figure out how to look at new technologies and figuring out how to bring them together so that we can really focus on the entire benefit. And myself personally, one of the things that I found really interesting, and hopefully RMI can send this out with the slides, is a 2023 study by the Brattle Group, which really talked about VPPs and saying, we have to evolve where we're looking at the regulatory review of utility system costs and benefits. And we really need to get into making sure that we're valuing the societal benefits as well. That includes emission reductions, as I mentioned, but also resiliency and making sure that we have the resource adequacy that we need, and we have that at the most responsible cost possible. So I think those are the really important things. And then both Carmen and Kara spoke to kind of the ability to use these aggregated resources to really address potentially daily and seasonal peaks, which is why we have to invest in peaker plants right now or other things. How can we really spread out so we reduce that volatility on the grid? So those are really the things for me as a new commissioner trying to focus on, and really understanding, as I noted, what are the cost benefits and making sure that full valuation is out there. But there's still a lot of work to be done in this space, and I'm sure Chairman McAllister is going to talk about this as well. There is a lot of devil in the details for us on the regulatory side as well to figure out how we are going to track VPPs, value them, and make sure that they're properly in there. So there's still a lot of work to be done.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Commissioner Paradis. That was great. And I hope we get into some of those devil in the detail matters as we continue on in the discussion. Next, I'd like to turn to Commissioner Andrew McAllister. Mr. McAllister is the Commissioner of the California Energy Commission, a position he's held for quite a long time, for a dozen years, in fact. And before that, he was actually got his PhD working in energy resources. So he knows a huge amount about energy and has been working to define the California energy markets for many, many years. And California, of course, has done many things that other states have not done. And one of those is that California has actually implemented a measured approach where California is directly tying financial incentives to measured energy savings. I know that California is also, I believe, it's my understanding, planning to implement the measured approach when it moves on to, or when it submits its homes application as well. So, Commissioner, I hope you will tell us a little bit about the successes in California in using a measured approach to measuring energy savings, and how how that can help work and enabling virtual power plants.
Well, David, thanks so much, and really happy to be here. You raised expectations here for me. I hope I can meet them. First of all, I really value this conversation. I think sort of socializing these ideas. What is load flexibility generally? How is it really a modernization and an adaptation of what we've always done, which is emphasize energy efficiency? That's sort of the modern digitized version of energy efficiency, in my view, and sort of demystify this new resource class. And so I want to first just say, California is we're a big state, we're a big economy. I feel very fortunate to be in a state energy office that's well resourced and has a lot of expertise. And I acknowledge that a lot of energy offices and public utilities commission or public service commissions, don't necessarily have the kind of access to resources that California has. So there is that difference. There's obviously a gradation. There's a sort of a continuum of different authorities really across the state energy office realm and levels of kind of proactivity in terms of the regulatory approaches across different states. But I think the high level message that I want to send is just that load flexibility and the measured approach version of that IRA supports is not rocket science. These tools are here, they're ready for prime time, and they are a logical step for states, regulatory bodies, utilities to lean into to optimize their investments in the electric grid as we go forward. So I think I just want to make that clear point right at the get-go, and we can deepen the discussion in the Q&A perhaps. So first, I just want to talk about load flex a little bit, high level. Load flexibility, California is making some big investments in that. We're really standardizing around as much as we can using our standards making authority at the Energy Commission and really working our programs across the board, including with IRA, to enhance load flexibility and as really a resource that's going to be increasingly key for managing our electric grid going forward. And this point has been made, but I think it can't be repeated enough. Reliability cannot be compromised. So reliability is number one, and these load-based resources, aggregated load-based resources, can be clearly a cost-effective way to enhance reliability going forward. They can help manage costs. In California, certainly, and across the country, we have a lot of upward pressure on rates. That's wildfire management, it's grid hardening, it's really investing in our distribution grid, much of which has some deferred investment that needs to be corrected, undergrounding, things like that we're making big investments in. Preparing the grid for the future with, likely like a doubling of electricity sales in the next couple of decades as we electrify transportation, buildings, et cetera, and industry. So manage costs, so reliability enhancement, managing costs, and then facilitating decarbonization. We want to use those kilowatt hours when they're clean and cheap, and shift away from kilowatt hours that are expensive and dirty. Load flexibility and the tools that help it happen are really great investments in reliability, managing costs, and facilitating decarbonization. So, and it's also worth saying that you don't have to be in a state that has a zero carbon goal for these approaches to make sense. Even when we are 100% decarbonized in California, load flexibility and the tools to manage demand side resources and aggregate them will be an ongoing assistance in enhancing reliability, maintaining reliability, and managing costs. So these are approaches that are with us for the long term. Like, we are very clear in California that we're all in on this, and we're ready. You know, we're in the age of you know, digital communications and inexpensive automation, and so that's really what this is about. So, you know, you can call it flexible efficiency, active efficiency, load flexibility, demand response, lots of different terms, but that's what we're talking about. The IRA measure path is really primed to juice this approach. I think really to expand this approach, you know, across the country. Kara mentioned the time and location aspects, and these are key. Managing the grid has very clear time and location requirements, and so you know, these are essential to the performance-based approach in our view. And so we're really leaning into those grid management elements of load flexibility. So our IRA, I'll just happy in the Q&A to talk about, you know, load management standards and flexible demand appliance standards and our building code and all the ways that we're sort of building load flexibility into our ecosystem across the board. We have a 7,000 megawatt load flexibility goal that we've established here. So, you know, all of this is relevant for that. But finally, I'll just wrap by saying, you know, the IRA measured approach, we are going to make a big investment in that. We're going to really, you know, pump our IRA homes money into a measured approach that a statewide program that's a pay for performance program that's going to rely on the measured approach to, you know, we're going to actually use these tools, as Carmen said, to target the areas and the individual homes that have the most benefit, the most potential benefits in terms of getting the customer the savings they need and also benefiting the grid in terms of load shaping. And then use the measured approach, you know, to establish that baseline and then measure the savings and then pay the aggregator for the savings, for the risk that they've taken, for the investment they've made and the commitment they've made to achieve the performance that we know is there. So I think the IRA homes measured approach just really supports this vision that California has been developing for a number of years. We know it works. We've been using it in programs, market access program. The PUC has been using it, and you know, we actually helped fund the development of some of these tools and methodologies that are now in the open source world. So we're really wanting to take advantage of this public resource that we've helped develop and really get the benefit of it for grid management and all the things I talked about as the benefits of load flexibility generally. Last thing I'll say, you know, LBL. So Commissioner Paradis mentioned the Brattle report from last year. Berkeley Lab has done so really great work for decades on demand response and now load flexibility, and it has done a series of reports about the benefits of load flexibility, and they have sort of coined some terms. You know, it's shed, shift, shape, shimmy. All of these demand flexibility tools at different time scales can really help manage the grid in myriad ways. So I think this is a broader conversation, and the Department of Energy, you know, the Biden administration Department of Energy and IRA program investments in pushing the markets in this direction is really going to help us get there quicker and more effectively.
Thank you so much, Commissioner McAllister. I really liked your description of how you see the measured approach as really, you know, jumpstarting VPPs across the country. We're now going to turn into discussion. I see a bunch of questions have come in the Q&A chat. And I encourage folks to enter more questions. I'm going to get to those in just a moment. First, I want to start with one question of my own, and this I'm going to you know, direct to Carmen. So, Carmen, as you know, sort of building off what Commissioner McAllister said on you know, measured approach, having the ability to really jumpstart virtual power plants across the country to provide the tools for them. What advice would you give to states as they're thinking about implementing either measured approach or other policies with respect to similar sort of principles that could really help facilitate virtual power plants?
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I'll piggyback on Commissioner McAllister's phrase that it's really not rocket science. There are lots of resources out there to get jump started, and they might actually be hiding right in front of you or right under your nose. As Commissioner Paradis was saying, a lot of energy efficiency programs that have been out there, many of them have evaluation contractors that have been kind of following around, and that industry has been around for a good several decades, building the practices that really enable a measured approach or being able to shift programs into a space that would be able to tracking closer to real time how those programs are performing, and to be able to use that as actionable feedback as they're deploying the programs. So there isn't necessarily that much of an innovation on the techniques that are being used, but it's really when and where they're being deployed, and then leveraging this data and digitization to make it accessible so you can be using it for both transactions and settlement as part of the program, aligning incentives in addition to being able to see how they performed, and then use that as an actuarial feedback loop, right? So you can keep iterating on the things that are working and adapt the things that aren't working so they can be working going forward. I would also note that there might be some surprises out there of places that are diving into a measured approach. Last year, Kansas put a clause in their settlement with Evergy for their new energy efficiency portfolio that they wanted to do it with through a measured lens, as it were. So they have a new M&V plan that they have claimed, or they're ready. The plan itself is prepared to measure about 90% of what is in their existing energy efficiency portfolio. And with that, they're also anticipating that as their programs evolve from their kind of original traditional ones, with this measured intel, they might need to adapt and modify them as they go. So they're already building for that future to kind of go from the crawl, walk, run sort of approach. So my advice is don't be intimidated. And second of all, get started now, because there's no time like the present to start building for the future.
Great. Thank you so much, Carmen. Let's see. So turning to questions in the chat, and I see there is one about MISO and VPPs in the Midwest, and whether you see those as a distribution system resource. And so, of course, I'm going to direct this to Commissioner Paradis. But Commissioner Paradis, perhaps I'll broaden the question a little bit. Illinois, of course, is an interesting state in that you actually are governed by two different RTOs, both PJM and MISO. And I imagine that must complicate things a little bit. So I guess maybe you could not only comment on the specific question, but also, what would you like to really see from RTOs? What policies do RTOs really need to provide in order to help enable VPPs within their areas?
That is a hot topic right now, David. You are correct. Yes, so Illinois is a deregulated state. So ComEd in the northern part of the state is in PJM. Ameren, which is the southern 2/3 of the state, is in MISO. Over time, they have been very different in how they kind of value energy efficiency. And so that is something that still needs to happen to educate everyone. From a commission standpoint, we have one commissioner that is able to sit on the advisory boards, one to OMS and OPSI, which are to PJM and MISO, and do that with all the other states that are on those to kind of provide feedback. We don't get to vote. We are not on the boards of any of those organizations, but we are able to kind of provide that information. One thing that's ramping up right now is the amount of time that we're spending with other states, really educating them on energy efficiency. And I'm actually doing the same thing, educating the other commissioners here in Illinois on it, because as Carmen mentioned, a lot of these energy efficiency programs have extensive evaluation practices that have been happening for years and years, but it's different by state. And the challenge that the RTOs are having is, can you lump everybody in together, and then can you still count the savings as the same if you have a strong evaluation framework that we have here in Illinois, and then say compare it to other states that might not have as stringent of an evaluation and a measurement system. So that is one area that's going to take a lot of work, and those are a lot of those devil in the details that I mentioned before. The other thing that causes a little challenge for us here in Illinois, you would ask me, David, and I don't think I answered your question about our state energy office and how we're handling some of the rebates that are coming through. So two things again about Illinois. I think most people are familiar with the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act that was passed in 2021. That really gives us guidance on where we are on the emissions side with specific goals for the state. Only dealt with electric, not with natural gas. And that is managed by our Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Unfortunately, our state energy office is in our Environmental Protection Agency. So we're already having disconnects between where the funding is coming in on the federal side and then finding ways to kind of braid and stack it with utility. So the utility programs are under DCO with CEJA. The federal funds are coming in through our state energy office at IEPA. So we're spending some time and expertise working with our state energy office to figuring out how we can braid and stack programs to come together to maximize on those investments. But again, a lot of details here. And one of the biggest issues that are going to come up there, not only is evaluations of making sure the savings are real, but the attribution piece. How much of the attribution can go to the utilities based on what they're required to do under the state programs, as well as then just federal money coming in that they shouldn't be able to claim credit against. So we do have a lot of work to do. And when it comes to MISO, we are, to the question that came up, they've been a little more conservative in how they've really valued energy efficiency and some of these clean energy resources. So we are spending time to really ramp up in that space and talk to them about it. But I think with this federal money coming in, that's going to hopefully increase that comfort level. So there's increased valuation there.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Paradis. Moving right into another question, and this one I'll direct to Kara. Question from the chat or from the Q&A. Do you see the future of rebate could be dynamic pricing instead of peak or off-peak static model? Kara, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I certainly hope so. That's sort of the concept and the idea is to allow for market-based approaches that are going to really help incentivize people, reducing their energy use on peak and understanding, feeling, and valuing the energy they use differently, and increasing the understanding of energy users in buildings that particularly in homes that not all kilowatt hours are created equal, that energy at certain times of the day is more valuable to the grid, and that they're rewarded for reducing consumption during the times when it's more valuable to the grid. It's more valuable to utility, it's more valuable to the climate to reduce at that time. So it's giving people the right incentive structures to do that. I certainly hope we'll see that, and that right now these incentives can help state energy offices really choose those concepts and move that idea forward, so that then utility commissions can come on the back end and say, yeah, this worked, let's continue, let's do this through time of use.
Commissioner McAllister, I see you have your hand raised.
I just wanted to jump in here. Okay, just acknowledging that I'm a state energy office and not a rate making body here, like a public service commission. So there's a balance that most PUCs, public service commissions, kind of try to achieve between sending the right incentives to the customer to use energy sort of when it's most appropriate. That definition is changing as we prioritize, say, decarbonization and sort of grid investments and things. The peak is no longer in the middle of the day, but more in the net peak in the evening time. So that creates some complications for rate making. But there needs to be a balance between sending those incentives properly that align with grid needs and value, but not confusing the heck out of the customer, right? So I think there's like a residential customer, is not necessarily going to be able to respond to like a real-time price. They may not have that flexibility. Most don't want to pay attention to their sort of energy consumption in that kind of a time scale. So there needs to be some middle ground, and that's going to look different in probably every state. But I think these tools enable us to be much more explicit about where that value is, and look for innovative ways to reward customers for using power when it's sort of most beneficial, and letting states, PUCs, and utilities manage their investment in building out and improving the distribution grid over time as we load it increasingly with new electricity loads.
Thank you. There's a new question that came in at the bottom of the Q&A that looks interesting. How can we ensure that state IRA rebate programs, including flexible installations, are recognized by utility and RTO planners? So I'm going to throw that one out to the group and see who would like to take a stab at it.
Well, ensure is a tricky word in that phrase, I would say. And being an entity that doesn't have authority, it maybe is easier for me to answer the question, or at least throw something out there. I think one of the ways is making sure that the IRA rebate initiatives are somehow tied into existing strategies and solutions. Now, I know that there are trade-offs of being able to piggyback these incentives with existing utility programs, for example. Maybe that leaves out municipal utilities or co-ops that haven't been participating in the past. But it seems to me, back to my earlier point about kind of finding the right solutions that are going to fit for the long term, having all of those entities kind of part of the conversation is how you can have a better shot at making sure that resource planners, even in a co-op or a municipal utility, they might even be better suited to take the first steps of understanding how these investments could affect their grid. And that's really the first part of the conversation. There's a lot of cash flowing in. There's going to be changes in energy consumption. How are they going to affect me and or not me, but me, the utility, or me, the co-op muni, and what I need to plan for. And we know that they're planning for a clean energy transition with electric vehicles, et cetera. Heat pumps are the same. They have a lot of benefits for controllability, upside, et cetera. And of course, having high efficiency, high performing homes and buildings, residential buildings, are going to have the same sort of effect for the long-term grid planning. So engaging them in the conversation now, I would say, is the best way you can ensure that these resources could be recognized in the future.
I wanted to jump in. Oh, sorry, go ahead. You want to.
So the only thing I was going to note is I would love to see more utilities and RTO planners at the table wanting to help make these rebates a success, because we need the utilities to say, we're going to provide access to data. We're going to provide the information that you need to make these rebates a success, and incorporate this into the future so that this isn't just a one-time thing, but this is something that we're going to be looking at to kind of make a more flexible, nimble grid and make consumers a part of that solution. So I'd like to see them engage in a really constructive way. And one of those ways is helping with the data access elements.
So I was going to mention data access and also just predictability. There has to be, socializing these approaches needs to result in a wide acknowledgement and trust that these resources are showing up in an aggregated, particular, like accountable way, and that they can be counted on by grid planners as a resource. And I think being more rigorous and utilizing these tools is absolutely the way to go to make that happen. In California, we don't have an RTO. We have, resource adequacy program. And if you're going to allow aggregated demand side resources or just distributed resources to play in RA, that is a pretty high bar of accountability. And so I think that that's where we're going here, is more rigor, more accountability, transparency, and predictability. And so even as markets, say in the West, we're having a conversation about integrating markets across the West, being more intentional about the various balancing authorities, and maybe even eventually moving towards a regional organization of some sort. the bigger the aggregation, the more the potential impact, but also the longer that chain is of accountability. And so I think having our CAISO trust that they can push a button and move load on a hot summer day, say, or in some other moment where there's an N-1 or some wildfire impacts or whatever, having these aggregated resources play as a trusted part of the resource stack is totally doable with these resources. And these are the tools we've needed all along to do that.
I think that's exactly right. But I think when it comes to the RTOs, just speaking generally and some of our experience in Illinois, that's where the biggest challenge is right now, is in trusting that. And so that's where a lot of the work needs to be done, I think, is really focused on that. And then selfishly, I think you hit this on the head before, Chairman, but not all states are created equal. Not all state energy offices are created equal. And I know a lot of us are spending time in the bigger states, but there is work happening in most of those. I want to make sure that stakeholders and all the advocates are out there working in those other states that might not have mature utility programs, might not have utility programs at all, and making sure that those states are also able to invest and take advantage of these rebates that are available and all the benefits that are going to come from them.
Let's see. So we are nearing the end of our time. I am going to give a warning to my panelists that we are going to conclude with me asking each of you to give one sentence, a single sentence that summarizes what you would like people to most take away from this. And I hope that sentence includes VPP. Let's see, but before doing that, just a little bit very quickly on, since we're on the topic of utility data, or rather since Commissioner McAllister, since you raised that, what advice, Commissioner, can you give to other states? Since I know California has looked into this a lot, and that having access to data is really critical for these programs to work, and for practitioners to be able to to be able to have the data, to be able to make savings. What, just very quickly, because we are short on time, but, what advice could you provide to states looking at utility data?
Well, I think it really does have to be a collaborative effort of some sort. And, it really helps when the Public Utility Commission, Public Service Commission, and utilities and stakeholders can agree that data access is necessary and under what conditions, and really just work out that ecosystem to automate that as much as possible. Because the data is needed to do the transaction, right? And to understand, even if you're not having like a market, doing this in real time and sort of having settlement every day, within the measured approach, you really do need data, facile access to data to do the measurement. And that looks different in a lot of places across the country. I mean, some relationships are very cordial and very I think collaborative, and others require more of a sort of a heavy-handed approach. Maybe I mean, we have significant authority in the Energy Commission and the Public Utilities Commission, and have used that authority to make data flow. So that's going to look different across the country, but I think there are third parties that are really facilitating that and making that data access very easy and low transaction cost.
And Commissioner, tell me, what is your one sentence takeaway that you want people to come away from here?
Well, I haven't mentioned virtual power plants the whole time, but I think virtual power plants are an iteration of this enterprise that I think really can help socialize the viability of aggregated demand side and localized resources. And the tools are here now, and we all need to be using them to help our ratepayers with manage their electricity use and cost over time going forward.
Great, thank you. And next, I will turn to Commissioner Paradis. What is your one sentence takeaway?
So I'm doing two, David, sorry. The first one is we've got to get the valuation right. So we've got to build the trust in VPPs, and we've got to make sure that we're valuing that resource. The second thing is a call to action, as I mentioned when I first spoke, is we need to have more people engaging and educating the commissions and the RTOs on how this all actually works. We need really more people spending time really digging in with those folks.
Thank you. Let's see, Kara, your one sentence takeaway.
I'm going to say that electrification and the movement towards electrification and decarbonization, coupled with the data centers and such that are needed to this new world of I think we really need to be enabling. We need to be enabling virtual power plants so that we can use it so that we can enable. We need to enable virtual power plants just so that we can have a flexible grid that can meet all the demands of the future that we're all trying to build here. So I think data access is really critical. And part of the measured approach is understanding what measures actually deliver, what is delivering the deepest energy savings, so the policymakers actually have the data to back that. And it'll make the models better as well, so that the models will be able to better predict what measures are going to provide that savings.
Thank you. That's a long sentence.
Yes.
Carmen, your one.
Maybe I'll make up for Kara's long sentence by doing 2 words: better together. The inspiration for this panel was to have IRA and VPPs side by side. I think we've had lots of examples today of how they could be better together, and I'd like folks to just extend that into their daily thinking. Even though it might take some more work, I think we're going to be able to get to better solutions as we synergize and not fragment.
Thank you very much to all of our panelists. I give you a big virtual round of applause, and I will turn it back to my co-host, Avery. And Avery, I'm hoping you will grace us with your one sentence takeaway as well.
Yes, thank you, David. My takeaway is, yeah, I think one word is synergy. I'm just seeing a lot of resources aligning. And to that end, we have a lot of resources that you can explore as a follow-on to this webinar. So we're going to be posting the slides. We have all these links here. We linked the Brattle report as well that was mentioned during the call. So just wanted to express my thank you to David and the Flex Coalition for partnering on this webinar. And thank you to Carmen, Kara, Commissioner Paradis, and Commissioner McAllister for your time in the discussion. And thank you to the audience for your incredible Q&A. It was very lively, and we really appreciated all of your questions. So you can check back on the RMI website soon. You'll see the recording as well as the slides. For now, take care, and thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you.